to episode 3 of Don't Trust the Neighbours. I am Kirsty.
I'm Olivia.
And today we're headed to my home country of Scotland. More specifically, we are headed to central Scotland and the small town of Dunblane. Dunblane is actually a pretty small, picturesque town. Most of you will probably know it as the hometown of Andy and Jamie Murray. Local in Scotland, it's known as having the Dunblane Hydro, which is a really nice hotel, kind of spa resort. A lot of people go there for nice weekends.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I know. Fact of the day. Yeah, it's really pretty, actually. It was built like in the 1800s as a spa resort. And then I think definitely in World War II, it was used as a hospital, like a military hospital. It may have been used in World War I as well, but possibly not. Yeah, it's actually a really nice place. We should maybe go sometime. The majority of people listening today, because this is a true crime podcast, will know it as the location of the UK's only school shooting and the UK's largest ever mass shooting. Today, not only will we be delving into the events that took place on that day, but also looking at the events that led up to it and the historic and heroic work of the parents of those children went on to do. Work that today helps protect the lives of us here in the UK. I would also like to say as well, for me personally, this is quite an important case to cover. So I grew up in the northeast of Scotland, so further away up north than Dunblane is, but I am the same age as the children I was the same age as the children affected in today's episode. I went to the same type of school that Dunblane Primary was. And by that, I mean a very small village or town school, one where the classes are pretty small and you know everyone. And to this day, if anyone says Dunblane, the first image that comes to my head is this news footage of this woman just running down the street while pushing a buggy, with just running as quick as she could to get to that primary school.
It's kind of one of those, like with 9/11, it's like everyone says, I remember where I was on the day of 9/11. It's like everyone remembers where they were the day of Dunblane.
Completely, absolutely. And it's so bizarre because, like I said, I was the same age as these children, so I was like 5 at the time. But I remember that day. It was when our school closed early, and like I said, it was a small town village, so most of the time when school would let out, you would kind of like run around the playground and play with your friends while your mum or dad kind of spoke to people at the gates. That day, it was pretty much grab your child, throw them in the back of the car and go home. For those of you who have no idea what the hell we were just talking about, in today's case, we were discussing the Dunblane Massacre. And this one is going to be a pretty rough one, guys, so strap yourselves in. On the 13th of March, 1996, Thomas Hamilton walked into Dunblane Primary School and shot and murdered 16 5- and 6-year-old children and their teacher. So who was Thomas Hamilton and what led him to commit such a catastrophically devastating event? Thomas Watt Hamilton was born on the 10th of May 1952 in Glasgow. He never knew his biological father, and he grew up believing that his mother's adoptive parents were his biological parents and that his mother was his sister. He actually didn't know the truth of this until he was 22 years old. 22 years of your life, you thought your mother was your sister.
That would just be such a shock. Would just be... Yeah. I think no one could comprehend how that would feel.
Exactly. And Thomas Hamilton's grandmother, Catherine Hamilton, was known as a bit of a hard-handed woman in the local town. So she was known for not taking any sort of nonsense. So I don't think home life was particularly a happy life growing up. Catherine's need to control the environment was so impactful to Thomas's life going forward. So I know it's the 1950s and having a child out of wedlock was very different than it is today, but that need to control the image to the outside world and that need for control over your life is so relevant to everything that then goes on to take place in this man's life. During school, Thomas didn't have a lot of friends. He was known as a bit of a loner, did not mix well with others. And from his mid-teens, he was known to have a bit of an unnatural obsession with young boys and a need for control.
In their mid-teens, don't notice anything. Like, kids are really dumb. So for his peers to notice that he had an interest in younger boys is a really big thing.
Yeah,
at that age, you're not thinking about that kind of thing. It's just not in your I don't know, your circumference.
No, and I think as well, especially if he was born in the 50s, mid-teens, he would be like, what, in late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah.
Obviously, paedophilia was a thing, but it wasn't such a known thing as it is today. I think if you were to take Thomas Hamilton's life, the way he behaves about young boys, and put it in today's society, you could pick it up as being picked up, but...
And it's like back then as well, like I've always been told that it's been like you left your doors open and your neighbours could just come around and walk in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, it's so trusting of other people.
Yeah, exactly. It was much more trusting world, much more simple. Well, not really.
Not like now.
Yeah, basically everything was just hidden behind closed doors. All the same shit went on. But going back to Thomas's behaviour in school, being a loner and not mixing well with his others, it's just such. And I know back in the 50s and 60s again, teachers were much more strict and they weren't as keyed in as things to like the welfare of the child and the welfare of the family and what's going on at home. But I think it's such a story for early intervention. Had a teacher noticed that this child was withdrawn, didn't mix well with others, maybe had this unnatural obsession with boys and his need for control, maybe if they'd spoken to him, spoken to the family, would things have been different? I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And I do understand that, some people are born with conditions like psychopathy and some things can't be changed and some people do behave the way they do because that's just how their brain is wired. But some people aren't born with psychopathy. They're kind of triggered into it in life.
Yeah. Some people are just come off as a bit odd or weird.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do just need to, although you don't want to offend anyone, just kind of be like, well, what's going on with you and figure out if there is something going on. Like, even if it's just like you're not talking as much in class.
Yeah.
Like little things like that mean a lot.
Completely. And I'm just such an advocate for early intervention, such an advocate for it, especially even if it is a child, because in the UK, I think it's actually maybe the same worldwide, you can't actually be diagnosed with psychopathy or other personality disorders until you're 18. So if you have a child who maybe does suffer this condition, the parents can be doing everything they can at home, but they're struggling because a lot of the times you need social work referrals and stuff to get help for things like this. And teachers making that connection and making those referrals can help so much.
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. In 1973, at the age of 20, Hamilton became an assistant Boy Scout leader, where he would reportedly spend time with the boys, teaching them how to use handguns. But once again, he soon became under suspicion due to his behaviour towards the boys. On the 13th of May in 1974, not maybe about a year after he joined, he was fired from the Scouts. And his scout warrant was withdrawn when the county commissioner became, and I quote, suspicious of his moral intention towards the boys. After it was discovered, he was asking several boys to sleep with him in his van while on camping trips. That's just a no. Just don't do that. Don't. No.
Did any of the boys go with him?
Yeah. They said nothing happened, that they just slept with him in the back of his van.
I mean, he could have I don't know, like the idea that he could get them there at least. And like so they trusted him enough to go with him.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean,
how a trip.
Yeah, 100%. His need for control in his life is so dominant. It's so dominant in his life. So at the same time when he was being rejected from the Boy Scouts, Hamilton became obsessed with guns. So in 1974, he joined a gun club, bought 5 different types of firearms, and continued to buy and sell more as the years progressed. He also joined several other gun clubs to improve his marksmanship. He went on several times throughout the next few years to try and get back into the Boy Scout organisation, but he was repeatedly declined. And then after so many attempts to get him back in, eventually the Boy Scout organisation blacklisted him.
Good.
Yeah, well, this is what I was going to say, because I think it's good that this back in the 70s, at least the Scouts were looking out for nonsense like this and kicking them out of organisations, unlike some other places we know who knew about paedophiles but just turned a blind eye. Hashtag football coaching, just saying.
Drag them.
Drag them, yes. After he was blacklisted from the Scouts, he decided that he was going to start his own boys' clubs. And remember, these clubs are open to boys aged between 7 and 11. One of the main activities was, you guessed it, target practice. However, there was also swimming and gymnastics, both of which the boys did topless. And if that's not enough to make you throw up in your mouth a little bit, I don't know what is.
That's awful.
It's disgusting.
Had anyone said anything that, like, he did anything appropriate during this time?
He made the boys wear no tops, which is inappropriate. Yeah. So yes, he did do something inappropriate. During this time, again, he repeatedly came under fire about his behaviour towards young boys. The boys, during their swimming and gymnastics, were made to wear matching black swim shorts as a uniform and no tops. Hamilton was accused of taking the pictures of the boys in their swimming shorts without their parents' permission and then displaying them in his home.
How did people find out they were in his home?
Well, apparently he used to show them off to people that came into his house and say, like, these are my boys' clubs. I'm so proud of my boys.
I swear that's been in a horror movie before. I can't remember what it was.
It's every single monster horror movie out there, man.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. When these rumours really began to take hold in the 90s, parents started to remove their children from these clubs and numbers really started to dwindle.
I should hope so.
Yeah, one would hope. He was subsequently investigated by Child Protective Services. Although no charges were ever filed, he became locally as a bit of a nonce. And it was even more ostracised and a bit of a more of a loner in society than he was before. But, like, what can you expect? You're taking pictures of people's half-naked children and putting them in your house. Like, how can you not expect to be called a paedophile in your local town?
And he's not being subtle. He's being very ambitious about the whole thing. He's, like, made it his life's mission to be the leader of a Boy Scout group, which isn't weird, but with his history, it's a flag. It's a big flag.
It's a massive flag. It's a massive
It's a castle of flags.
It's like, yeah, it really is. It's gross. I hate it. So in Dunblane, he became known as, and I quote, Mr. Creepy. And knowing what he goes on to do, this name was nowhere near offensive enough. So insert whichever adjective you choose to insert here. He's just such a knob. He really is. Like, people who knew him described him as deceitful, intolerant, suffers of delusion of grandeur, and a bit of a weirdo.
Did anyone like him?
No one really liked him. No. And you can't blame him. Like, the people who sent him to his clubs, he's like taking pictures of their half-naked children.
Yeah.
Like, what do you expect? Of course, you're going to be ostracized within the town. In Dunblane is not a big town. It's a small town.
Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't move anywhere to see if he could, like, carry it on anywhere else. Just saying. Oh.
Here we're going. So with his boys' club numbers dwindling, he applied for a volunteer role at Dunblane Primary School, but he was unsuccessful in that role. Like, why do you think you're unsuccessful? He just can't keep away from young boys. If he didn't do what he's about to go on to do, I am so convinced his behaviour towards young boys would have escalated, without a doubt.
If it wasn't this one-time, like, serial killing spree, then he would have just gone on to probably groom boys and slowly kill them, maybe.
Yeah, he would have absolutely molested children going forward. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
I don't think he did either. I think he was just like, he's going to have young boys no matter the cost.
Yeah, exactly. He's someone who loves control and really in particular loves control over young boys. And when you think, like, the boys groups were open to boys between 7 and 11, that's such a specific age group as well for a boys club. It's just it's creepy.
It does make you think, though. It's like, is there anyone else doing this today to young boys? Because there's so many groups.
There's so many groups, but I think, well, I hope checks are much more stringent today. People have to, like, be DBS checked and stuff if they're going to be around children. Whereas I don't think that those things really existed for groups back in the 70s and 80s. No. Anyway, his rejection of the job in Dunblane Primary School, he solely blamed on local gossip about his character and name. So in order to clear his name, because image is everything to him. He doesn't want to be known as a nonce, doesn't want to be known as a paedophile. There's other ways to stop that, just don't be a nonce or a paedophile. But he decides the best way to clear his name is to write to the Prime Minister and the Queen and ask them basically to make the people in Dunblane stop calling him names.
That's ridiculous.
It's
a narcissist.
It's complete narcissist. It's just such an example of his inflated sense of ego and his me against the world attitude, like, and his utter need to control his image. Like, why the name of God is the Queen or the Prime Minister going to give a shit that your village think you're a bit of a nonce?
It would be good though if she like came out and was like, "Can you stop being a nonce instead?"
She should. Oh, well, you know who else you should tell that to? Andrew. Just saying.
No, I shouldn't have said that. It's far too much of an expectation.
When his letters from the Queen went unanswered, shock, he got more and more angry and more vengeful. And he decides the best way to take this out is the last institution that rejected him, Dunblane Primary School, and on the community that ostracised him, Dunblane. So on the 13th of March 1996, Thomas Hamilton was seen outside his house around about 8:15 a.m, de-icing and scraping the snow off the windscreen of his van. He then got in his van and drove towards Dunblane. It's believed he was trying to get to the school in time for the morning assembly, when the entire school would be in the hall. Mercifully, if you can even use that word in this case, there were roadworks taking place on his route that day, meaning he was late and didn't arrive at the school until 9:30 a.m. when the assembly was over and classes had begun. When he arrived at the school, he drove into the car park, parked next to a telegraph pole and cut the wires. So the wires that he cut from the telegraph pole actually served the houses next door to the school. But I think it's pretty safe to assume he believed these served the school. And by cutting these meant that no one from within would be able to call for help.
Sick.
Yeah. Actually, guys, like, strap yourselves in now. This is where it gets rough from now on forward. After cutting the wires, Hamilton then entered the school. Although no one knows what door he used, it is believed he used a side door on the northeast side. When he walked into that school, he was armed with 4 legally held handguns and 723 cartridges of ammunition. This was enough to kill every single person in that school. He then walked through the now empty assembly hall, fired 2 shots at the stage, and made his way towards the gym hall, where the primary 1 class had just begun their lessons.
Oh.
Yeah. When he entered the gym, he first saw Aileen Harold, the PE teacher in charge of the lesson. She said that he walked into the door with such force that the door slammed up each side of the wall, and he just began firing instantly. Aileen was shot in the arms and the chest as she tried to protect herself. However, Hamilton continued shooting into the gym in every direction possible. Harold, although severely injured, managed to grab some of the children who had also been injured and drag them into the store supply cupboard at the end of the gym. While this was happening, Gwen Mayer, the main teacher for the primary 1 class, tried to fight him off. When she was unable to subdue him, she stood in front of the children that were behind her with her arms held out wide, trying to shield them. Hamilton fired several shots at her, and tragically she was killed instantly. The only other adult in this room was Mary Blake. She was a teaching assistant. And even though she'd been shot in the head and both of her legs, she also managed to drag several children into that storeroom that Aileen Harold was hiding in with the other wounded children. Can we just take a moment to respect the hell out of these women? These women have fought with an armed gunman. Both Mary and Aileen are seriously injured, and tragically, Gwen Mayer has lost her life. But these women, they fought. Their first thought was to protect these children. During Gwen Mayer's autopsy, they found several defensive wounds, and she'd also been punched in the face when she had literally grappled with Thomas Hamilton trying to disarm him. Utter hero. I just have so much respect for all these women. They just did everything they could to keep these children safe. By this point, Hamilton is still in the gym. He has fired 29 shots with 1 pistol. He has seriously injured several children, already killed 1 child. 4 injured children have taken shelter in the store cupboard along with Harold and Blake. The latter has spoken about children crying out for their mum. like wounded children just lying in the cupboard crying for their mum, and the two women desperately trying to shush them and keep them safe in the cupboard. Eileen has also spoke about one boy, and this just, the innocence of this statement just cuts you. So there's this one boy who's been quite seriously injured, is in the cupboard, and he kept saying, "That's a bad man out there, isn't it? He's a bad man. That's a bad man." And they kept having to shush this small child and then convince him just to lie down and be quiet and keep safe in the cupboard. And just the innocence of a 5-year-old child who's been shot. That's a bad man. It's just heartbreaking. The other thing, this is amazing as well. So Eileen says that when she's in the store cupboard, although she can't see what Hamilton's doing, her hearing becomes so much more intensified, and she can focus on where he is. She can kind of hear where he's walking to and where he was in the gym. She hears as Hamilton moves further into the gym, firing shots as he walked. He then walked back to the center of the gym. Now, in the center of the gym were a group of children who had already been seriously wounded. They were huddled together and they were trying to crawl away. He walked back over to them. He stood directly over them and he fired 16 shots at point blank range. 16 shots.
That's disgusting.
Yeah. These were injured and terrified 5- and 6-year-old children, and he stood over them and he shot them and he shot them and he shot them again. 5- and 6-year-old children. Just let that sink in, because these kids did not stand a chance.
And they're completely innocent as well. To do that to a child who's done nothing. Like, they're not talking about you. They're not calling you a nonce.
No.
Like, and fair enough, you didn't get a job at the school. So what? They don't know you. They don't give a shit who you are.
Exactly. It's so...
Look a child in the face and shoot them point blank. You've just got to be another level of just disgusting.
Just vile. It's just such a senseless act of violence and destruction. So at this point, a student from another class, so the primary 7 class, so around 11, 12 years old, walked by the west side of the gym and he heard the bangs and the screams. He looked inside the gym and saw the bodies of the children and of Gwen Mayer, and he saw Ian Hamilton. He turned to run and get away. Hamilton saw him and fired towards the door. The child did manage to get away. However, he was pretty injured by flying glass from the bullets that hit the door as he tried to run. Hamilton then fired 24 more shots in that direction. He then walked to the fire exit at the southeast side of the gym, fired 4 more shots out of that fire exit, walked through the fire exit and left the gym. Once walking out of the gym, he walked into the cloakroom and shot and injured staff member Grace Tweedle, then left the building totally and was in the playground. So once he was in the playground, he was next to a mobile classroom, so kind of like a porta-cabin kind of classroom.
Yeah, we had one of them. They're meant to be like, at our school, they're meant to be like temporary buildings, but they just become there forever.
They're meant to be, they're meant to be temporary at every school, mate, but they never are. They're just always there. They're always there.
I just feel like it's such a part of just like our culture here now.
Such a part of British schooling, isn't it? If you didn't go to one class in the porta cabin, did you go to school in Britain? But, so in this porta cabin, Catherine Gordon was teaching a class and she saw Hamilton fire several shots into the playground and screamed at the kids to get down and hide under their desks. Hamilton then proceeded to fire 7 shots into that classroom. However, thanks to Catherine Gordon's super quick thinking and actions, no one was injured in this class. Hamilton then did a 180, walked back into the gym, swapped one of the pistols he was using to one of the 2 revolvers he bought, put the gun in his mouth and killed himself. As if the injured children in the gym had not been through enough, he now makes them witness this. And this part is, if what we had already said wasn't horrific, this part is quite horrific. He left one child standing in the corner of the gym, petrified, uninjured and unshot. That one child, that one 5-year-old child, witnessed his whole class be gunned down. And then he witnessed Hamilton put a gun in his mouth and kill himself. That poor child. Like, how do you even begin to process that as a child as to what you witnessed, or as a parent trying to help that child process what they witnessed? It's just...
Being a child and being a teenager is already just so hard for everyone. It's so difficult. And then you add that horrific thing on top of it.
Yeah.
I hope he's okay.
I know,
That kid now.
In the space of 4 minutes, Thomas Hamilton had shot a total of 32 people, 16 of whom were fatally wounded, which included Gwen Mayer and 15 of her pupils. In 4 minutes. It's so hard to believe such devastation and heartbreak can be caused in such a short space of time by one person.
Enabled by guns as well. We're not forgetting the gun part.
Yeah, let's not forget the gun part. So
around it's 4 minutes of that. Is it really worth it? You wouldn't have felt good. Well, I don't know. I'm sure how he felt during that was not worth the lives taken.
Well, yeah, and I'm not being funny, but if you're just going to kill yourself at the end anyway, why take other people? Why take innocent people with you? So around 9:40 a.m., around about the same time Hamilton killed himself, staff member Agnes Olsen ran to the headmaster's office as she had heard bangs and screams and was like, I think there's a gunman in the school. Ron Taylor, the headmaster, is like, shit, call the police, someone now, but also like, this is Scotland. There's not a gunman in the school. Don't be silly. So he ran to the gym to find out what's happening, hoping and praying that these bangs that his other staff members heard are just construction noises happening in the village, and that the screams are just kids in the gym class having fun. Really hoping and praying. However, when he got to the gym and he walked in and he saw the bodies of his pupils and staff lying, his worst fears were realised. He then ran back to his office, told the deputy head to call for ambulances and doctors, and told her to instruct every teacher to keep all students in classes, keep them distracted under any circumstances, do not let them know what was happening. He then ran back to the gym and began any efforts he could to try and save the lives of his staff and people. Taylor was later described by police as a hero for the calm way in which he handled the shocking events and the distraught staff and pupils of that day. After that day, he gave a statement to TV as to what happened. He met with police. He wrote down his statement as to what he saw. And to this day, he has never once again spoken about what he witnessed on that day. At 9:57 a.m., the first ambulances arrived, followed shortly after by doctors and nurses from Dunblane Medical Practice. First two teams to attempt resuscitation on the injured and unfortunately murdered pupils at the school. Further medical teams from Doon and Callander, other villages nearby Dunblane, also arrived to assist with the resuscitation attempts of the small children. I can't even begin to imagine how horrific that scene was. Can you imagine being like a nurse or a doctor in a small GP practice where you're dealing with like diabetes and athlete's foot or, tennis elbow, and then the next thing you know, you're going to the scene of a mass shooting where 5 and 6-year-old children are just lying dead in the gym hall? How do you process that? You don't, do you?
It goes far deeper than just the kids that were killed that day. It's like all the people in the town who were affected.
Exactly. So by 11:15 a.m, all of the injured had been taken to nearby hospital, Stirling Royal Infirmary. However, upon examination, some of the children were so severely injured, having suffered several bullet wounds, that they were transferred to Glasgow's Children's Hospital for intensive care. Sadly, one child passed away while being transported to hospital. That brought Thomas Hamilton's death toll to 17. The lives he took that day were Gwen Mayer, aged 45, Victoria Elizabeth Clydesdale, aged 5, Emma Elizabeth Crozier, aged 5, Melissa Helen Curry, aged 5, Charlotte Louise Dunn, aged 5, Kevin Allen Hassel, aged 5, Ross William Irvine, aged 5, David Charles Kerr, aged 5, Vary Elizabeth Macbeth, aged 5, Brett McKinnon, aged 6, Abigail Joanne McLennan, aged 5, Emily Morton, aged 5, Sophie Jane Lockwood North, aged 5, John Petrie, aged 5, Joanna Caroline Ross, aged 5, Hannah Louise Scott, aged 5, and Megan Turner, aged 5. Word in the town spread quickly that there had been reports of a gunman at the school, and parents dropped everything and ran. No one knew if the whole school was affected. Was it their child, and what was happening? Some parents have later spoken about the roads being blocked with so many parents trying to get to the school and being such a small town that they were basically abandoning their cars in the middle of the road, getting out and running to the school. When they got there, they were taken to a local hotel to wait for answers, while police and teachers tried desperately to identify the dead in the hall. As frightened parents waited to see if their child was alive or dead, Dunblane went from a small town in Scotland that unless you lived in the area, you would never have heard of it, to be in headline news around the world. Eventually, the parents from Mrs. Mayor's class, Primary 1, were all asked to move into another room in that hotel, where they were told that this was the class that was affected and that there had been several fatalities. One by one, the parents were moved to another room where a police officer, a teacher, and a social worker told them if their child was alive or dead. Mick North, father of victim Sophie North, spoke about doing the maths in his head repeatedly when it became less and less likely that his child had survived. 5 days later, on the 18th of March 1996, the UK observed a 2-minute silence for the victims of the massacre. It was also the start of a week of funerals in Dunblane. That week, Dunblane held funeral after funeral.
For the Orlando shooting, it was like, I think it took 7 minutes for him to get into the school and shoot loads of kids. So at the March for Our Lives protest, one of the girls who was at the school like made everyone in the audience do a 7-minute silence for the amount of time it took him to get into the school and then leave.
Yeah.
So I feel like they should do like a 4-minute silence for those kids every year.
Every year.
Already.
But you know what's really terrifying is if you think 2-minute silence, it was only double that time when he killed all those children. It is so terrifying. There is actually a really beautiful memorial garden in the cemetery where all the children that were killed in that day are buried. However, despite how beautiful that memorial garden is, these are children who should now be in their 30s, buried at just the ages of 5 and 6 because of the actions of one man and his narcissistic need to control his image. The people of Dunblane, along with the rest of the world, began to question why had this happened, but also how was it able to have happened? Why could one man be allowed access to such deadly weapons? When, during the police investigation, it became clear not only had Hamilton owned guns for over 20 years, but he had done so legally, but that everything he had done that day until he opened fire was perfectly legal. He was well within his right to carry those arms and those ammunition into that school legally without any consequence.
It's fucked up.
Yeah. The weapons and the ammunition used to murder 16 children and their teacher was purchased and owned legally. It's just so wrong. The people of Dunblane, the people of Scotland, and the people of the UK were horrified. If ownership of these weapons were legal, then it was only a matter of time until this happened again. And these heroic parents of these children were having none of that. They began the Snowdrop campaign. The Snowdrop campaign was named after the only flower in bloom the day that their children were murdered. The campaign called for tighter gun control, deeper background checks on anyone applying for a gun license, and the complete ban on privately owned handguns. The Snowdrop campaign went on to join forces with a London-based gun control organisation founded after the Hungerford Massacre in 1987. The campaign went on to amass 750,000 signatures. In 1997, government caved to the pressure and they passed the Firearm Amendment Act. This act banned all handguns above .22 caliber and put in much tighter restrictions for any small caliber weapon. The UK now has some of the tightest gun laws in the world. And due to this, that horrific massacre that took place in Dunblane on that snowy March morning remains the UK's only school shooting and largest ever mass shooting.
Well, that it took one shooting to happen in the UK before guns were completely banned.
Yep.
We covered a case in our first episode of Jason Dalton, where there were kids in America literally joking about a shooter being around because they're so desensitized to it.
Yeah.
So when you say like you need your guns for protection, you don't. We're doing just fine.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is as well, like during the Snowdrop campaign, when they were giving speeches and stuff, there were gun lobbyists in the UK fighting against them. Like, oh, we don't need gun law protection. What are you talking about? What do you mean what they're talking about? Their child's just been murdered by a gun. That's what they're talking about. Shut up.
Yeah.
Like, just know your place and shut up.
And this was from like one man's need to just, well, for one narcissist to have like a control over boys. And it's just like, now, like, I didn't know his name, Thomas Hamilton, but everyone knows the name Dunblane. And so he's just fucking irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. If you take one name away from this, don't take his name away, take the name Dunblane. Actually, don't take the name Dunblane away. Go back and listen to that list of those children and their teacher that were murdered and take their names away. They're the only names that matter in this case, not his. And that is it for this week. And thank you so much for listening. It really does mean the world.
Yeah, and also thank you to everyone who left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. It means the world.
So if you guys could give us a follow on Facebook or Instagram, that would be amazing. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.